I went over, instead of just starting with the testimony like I should have done, saying, Madam Chair, I'm delighted to be here, thank you for the privilege. I said there were a couple of things that happened just prior to me that I got to address. And one of them was the people from SCORE were there. And the president of SCORE asked, please, Madam Chair, may I have all the people from SCORE who are supporting the Common Core stand? And maybe she didn't say supporting Common Core. She didn't. She said supporting better education for our students stand. And all of them stood up. And I was just a little irritated. Because everyone in that room would have stood up had the question been asked, Madam Chair, may I have everyone in this room who wants better education for our students stand? I have devoted my life to improving education in mathematics for students from grade 7 through college and parents and everywhere else. Workshops throughout the United States from Alaska to Florida, taught at the University of Alaska, have worked on the language of math, math as problem solving, the use of manipulatives, the holistic approach to math, the language of math, you name it. I did workshops on it for teachers everywhere. I didn't get paid for doing them either except for transportation. And I devoted my life to that, and I want the best education we can possibly have, and Common Core is not going to provide it. So I said that first, and then when I started with my testimony, there wasn't time to finish quite the testimony, but I gave it to everybody, and I sent a copy to the governor the other day, which just seems to have gotten lost. They haven't found it among their policy experts yet, but I'm sure it will turn up somewhere there in the office within a day or two. The last thing I want to do is imagine. The young man who did a lot of research on language, and he does a lot of policy things on television, and he's the one who has all these little focus groups and finds out what words are really important. And he said, imagine is the most important word that you would want to use. So I want to close with this. Imagine you have a 4th grader who is pretty good at math. He can solve simple equations, knows all of his facts, solves simple problems, knows triangles and rectangles and can find the area and perimeter. But because every child is getting taught the same thing at the same time, he or she will have to sit in the back of the room while the other students draw pictures and try to explain to the teacher why it is that he thinks that 9 plus 12 is 21. Imagine your children coming home from school and the frustration that they're going to share with you, and the frustration you're going to have when you look at the papers, when these are the kinds of things they are asking them to do. No Child Left Behind was unsuccessful because it said no child. And everybody knows that when you say no, you are going to be reaching for failure, because there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or a dozen somewhere who can't cut it. So when we say every child has to meet these guidelines and be proficient on the tests that we're giving it, whether it be TARP or whatever else we're going to give, every child, we know it can't happen. And so some at the top, and Dr. Milgram is the one who has said 30% of our students are going to be frustrated with math and probably will not go on to higher math as they might otherwise have done. Now, I will be around, and there are more packets if some of you didn't get them out there on the table for you, to answer any other questions that you might have about the math standards.
Thank you all. I just realized I failed to recognize Denise. Denise, raise your hand. Okay, Denise lives in Horseshoe Bend, and she's the one that got the clubhouse. So there's Denise. Okay. All right. Next we have
Excuse me, it's Dr. McCullum.
All right. Next we have Candace Lawson, who has been a longtime Williamson County teacher, and a professional educator in Williamson County for 25 years. And this is Candy. Come on up, Candy. Thank you.
Good teacher, got lots of stuff. I'm Candy Emerson Lawson. I've been a teacher in Williamson County for years. I retired just recently. I'm a native Nashvilleian, born and raised in Nashville. I was educated at Harpeth Hall. I went to Peabody and Vanderbilt. I'm a homegirl. And I taught in this county. I actually opened Hunter's Bend, and that's where I retired from just a year and a half ago. So education is something that I obviously have invested a lot of time in and my passion in. I realized when I was about 12 years old, I just want to tell you a little bit about me so you know my heart. When I was 12 years old, we had a swimming pool, and there was a little neighbor friend that came and ended up jumping off the diving board. Well, when she jumped off the diving board, she sank to the bottom of the pool. And I'm standing on the side waiting for her to come up, and I'm looking down there, and I'm thinking she's going to surge off of the bottom and climb up. Well, she didn't. And so I jumped in, and I pulled her out, and she was coughing, and I realized she almost drowned. And I said, "Why would you do that?" And she said, "I was so embarrassed that I didn't know how to swim, and I thought that, I could just jump off the board and get to the side." So I told her, I said, "Well, you don't have to be embarrassed. I'll be glad to teach you." I said, "Come on over and we'll play." And, I was 12, and we'll swim, and I'll just teach you how to swim. And the thing I think for me that made the difference, and I felt a real calling for what I do, is that I was so joyful and excited about sharing that knowledge with someone and seeing how much it could change her life and her attitude about herself and her confidence level. And it just opened up things for her, an activity that she might not have been able to do. And so I learned at a very early age that I had a gift for that. And I love little people. I'm a child at heart. I spend a lot of time on the floor. It's one of my favorite places to be. And I've given my life to teaching elementary ed. And a lot of it has been in Williamson County. Before I start, I've got a couple of things I want you to think about some of the things I'm going to say, and with some of the things that I've heard Audrey and Hannah say, I may diverge a little bit from what I had hoped to share with you tonight, but I want you to think about this. If there's any part of something that is unwell, then the whole part is unwell. And Plato said that. So I want you to think about that as we're talking about this education that we're trying to provide for our kids, and we want it to be the best. And I can tell you that the representatives and the people that are serving this county and serving at the state want the best for Tennessee children. And they're taking a very hard look at the things that are coming down. But there's a lot of folks and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and you guys need to get educated about what is really going on. And I hope I can shed some light and amplify a little bit some of the things that my colleagues have shared. I wanted to share with you about, first of all, the definition of public school. I bet a lot of you think that public schools have been around forever, and in fact they've been around. The first school was established in the 1600s. It was the Boston Latin School. They taught a classical education. You hear that talked a lot about, but that's the humanities and Greek and Latin and math and music and visual arts and all kinds of things to incorporate sort of present children with a Renaissance education where they're very well-rounded. They know music and they know art and they recognize great writers and they've read wonderful literature, and that's the kind of education that they were raised with. Now, what has happened with the direction that the education is going now is we are diverging seriously from that path. And I will also tell you that the elite of the United States, those people that are supposed to be serving us, are sending their children to private institutions that are still teaching a classical education. Your children in public school are not getting that anymore. And the reason for that is, I'm afraid, something that you're not going to be very happy about. Audrey alluded to being from Maine, and I thought that was kind of interesting because one of the things I wanted to share with you tonight is that In the 1900s, there was a real shift in the way people looked at education. And a lot of the people that were looking at education were not the teachers. They were politicians, people in government, a lot of billionaires, Carnegie, Rockefeller, all of those people saw a great opportunity to use their money to shift and change thinking in the children of our country. The reason being that if you can indoctrinate or teach children a certain way of behavior or responding at a very early age, they would not depart from it. It's kind of like the Bible, teach them and they will follow that path. Along the way, it has gathered a whole lot of momentum. Now, true, we're at 2014, but I want you to get a sense that this is not a real new problem. It started in the early 1900s, around 1910, around that time, and it has gained an awful lot of momentum, and it's continuing to grow. But we are at the end of that project that they kind of undertook almost 100 years ago. And it is changing the way our students think. It's certainly changing the direction our country is going in. We do not teach founding fathers anymore. We do not talk about the Constitution. We have people that are in high office that totally ignore the laws of the land, and it's okay, they think, and it's not. Part of the problem is that the children that we're educating are not getting the facts. Now, the standards alone are just like a scaffolding on a house. It's just a structure. So it's not the standards that are really at fault here. It is the fact that we have businessmen and politicians that don't have our best interest at heart, that understand that this is also a big moneymaker. And they have attached, if you will, sort of an agenda to the opportunity to teach our children the way they want them to go. You've got lots and lots of money in education. You hear this talking about PARCC. That's one of the tests that if Common Core is adopted, that we're going to be responsible for providing for our children in this state. It's very expensive. We're going to have to pay for that. Our tax dollars are going to have to be paying for that, and it's an ongoing, very expensive endeavor. Not to mention the fact that they have found an incredible platform to use to push this thinking that they want them to have, and it's all through computers. You look at your school and you look how technology is just taking over. Did you know that, let me see if I can find it in my notes, one of the reasons that computers are and have been identified and probably were back in the 1950s, 1960s as an incredible tool to use in the classroom is because it cuts out that critical thinking piece. You set a child in front of a computer and it's telling them how to think and what to do and what to look at, and it's very entertaining, engaging for them. But it's not actually causing them to do much thinking. The computer has basically done all the thinking for them. So if you take it a little bit further and you think about the power of being able to put that information in front of a little mind, start early, and they're starting in kindergarten now, and you continue to feed them this information, it is going to cause those little people to think a certain way, and they will not depart from it as they get older. Now, back in the 1900s, like I said, when things sort of started shifting and they realized they had an incredible opportunity to use education to nationalize their own agenda, which we're seeing right now. Their agenda is being nationalized at the expense of our children. And again, Common Core, as was said before, is not tried and true. Are you willing to let your children be the guinea pigs for an experiment that they're really not going to know what the outcome is going to be for 8 to 10 years because it's never been tested? I, for one, am not. In 1948, the Educational Testing Services were formed for the United States. And the people that were actually on this were, again, the billionaires, the money makers, some of the politicians. And what they were doing is they were trying to create tests in the 1948 at this point that would prove that immigrants and blacks were not as literate or educationally minded as the whites were. And it was supported by funding from the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations. They had their own agenda. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. There's information about this. And in fact, I would encourage you to test everything. I mean, you're going to hear a lot of stuff about Common Core, not only from us, but certainly from coming out of the state. Test it, look it up, make sure that you know what it is, because that's what we do. Otherwise, we can get wrong information and jump to conclusions. But what they actually did was, with these tests, is again, they're testing and looking for certain information about your children. Now, with all the tests that they're doing now, they're doing the same thing. I don't know if you've heard about the data mining that's going on, but you need to be very concerned about that. Because what they're doing now at an early level, if you go to, if you have a young baby and you're in the pediatrician's office, they ask you to fill out a lot of information about those children. And already they're asking questions that have really no pertinence to the health of that child. They want to know things about you. They want to know about your genetic predispositions. They want to know what your religious affiliation is. They're asking questions like, do you have a gun in your house? How many books do you have? Where are the books located? Are you from a mixed family? I mean, it's insidious. And the fact that they're using this information, and it starts at a very early age, they're collecting now it will increase. But right now they're collecting over 400 different pieces of information about you, your family, and your children. Now the reason for them to do that is because through computers and through this indoctrinal program that they want, they are looking for ways to filter your children into tracks. They're going to be putting children either in a collegiate or a technical, you could call it vocational track, whatever you want to do. Now, I just want to show you something.
Give her a chair up there so she can have some.
Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. I would be happy to share this with you. I cannot let you have it, but I'll be happy to share it with you, and I'll leave it up here for you to look at if you're interested. This is from a 5th grade or a 3rd grade class. This one's for 10th grade, and in fact, they are surveying, as we speak tonight, your children in the classroom to find out whether they need to go into a cluster that's kind of geared toward college, or a cluster that's more geared toward different vocational skills, so that they can be the worker bees in the global economy, because that's where we're moving. We are moving into kind of a one big thing. And again, it goes back to, almost 120 years ago when people realized what they could do with education and how they've attached their own agenda to it. But I'd like you, take a look at this and see the kinds of questions that they're asking. And it's frightening. I mean, what they're doing is they've already decided that some of your children are not going to have upward mobility. They're not going to be able to go to college. They're not going to be able to decide what they want to do. They're not going to be able to create or be entrepreneurs or do lots of different things that we've been able to do. And for me, that is just heartbreaking, that they've already decided that some of us are not worth the time or the investment because we're better used in a different capacity. The other thing, real quick, I know my time is up. I just wanted to show you, they're also doing using some different kinds of, bracelets. Clemson University developed this. It's called a galvanic skin response bracelet that kids wear on their hands or arms or fingers or lots of different places on their body, even when they're holding a mouse. It's got all kinds of data chips in there that take different stimuli from your child, their respiration rate, what's going on with their eyes, or how are they reacting to different kinds of information, etc. And they're collecting that data on your children to decide where your child would best fit, this track or this track. And I have a school right here, and this is the letter that they sent to their parents, encouraging them to how excited they are to be using this technology. And this is the fingerprint thing to get them in and out of their classrooms. Now, the way they get the parents to do this is by saying, if you want your child to have access to technology and being able to do what everybody else in the school is, then we're going to have your information. And that's happening down at Franklin High School. We have 18-year-olds that were called into the office at Franklin High School, giving up their information and having the schools tell them, now don't tell your parents, but we know that you want to get on the computers and you need that technology, so we're going to take that and we're just going to input it from you and you don't need to tell them. Well, guess what? Those kids turned right around and went home and talked to their parents and said, I had to do something today so I could get on the computer. I don't know how you feel about that, but that to me is just, it's Marxist. It's like Hitler coming in and taking charge of in places he has absolutely no place and no reason to be there. So I'm going to leave these up here for you too. The last thing I want to say to you is that I've got 2 books up here. One of them is called It's Perfectly Normal, and this one is about changing bodies. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but in 2008, the Health Department, Department of Education, came out with an agenda for our children, and they want them to be sexually educated, and they're starting in kindergarten. Some of the programs they're using around the country actually have plush toys, body parts, if you will, men and women, or boys and girl body parts that they're passing around because they want the children to become familiar with their bodies. In this particular book, which has been approved for the language portion of the Common Core curriculum for kindergarten and first grade, I'd love for you to come up and take a look at this. This is just many, many pictures about different bodies in all their glory, which is fine, but I don't know how you feel about that. I don't, as a kindergarten, first grade teacher, and that's my area of expertise, I do not feel that this is appropriate. I don't. Now, if your child came into my class and asked me a question about a body part, I'm going to tell them, because as a teacher, I felt that, and I still do, that if they have a concern, I can answer that concern, and I would give them an honest answer, and I would do it. But some of this is so graphic. It also shows you in here how to masturbate. It shows children masturbating. It shows sexual intercourse and how to do it. It gives you directions. In this one, which is when your body is changing, you can see perfectly normal. You see the picture of a young girl masturbating in bed and a boy. And on the next, in 69, just come up and I'd be happy to share these things with you. But how to put on a condom and different types of birth control. And again, I'm not approved. I just don't think that this is the direction we need to go. It would not have been part of a classical education. And I think that we really, the time is now. I know my time is up and I'm so sorry I've taken so long. But I do challenge you, please get involved. Talk to your representatives at the state level. They need to know how you feel about this. They want to help and they want to be your voice. But you need to let them know what to say. Thank you so much.
Barb, you want to come up? Next, Barb Sturgeon is going to step up, who is going to give us a little update on what's going on in Catholic schools, because the Common Core affects not only public school, homeschool, private school, and Catholic school. And this is Barb Sturgeon. Hi.
I'm also running for county commissioner in District 8. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I'm a Catholic mother. I've had my kids in Catholic schools, well, my son's 22 now. And when we were first married, my husband would say, do we really need to pay all that extra money? The public schools are fabulous. And no, I wouldn't. That was the one battle I picked. I wasn't going to give up on that one. So, and now he is like so grateful that I stuck with Catholic schools because he's seen the way that some things have been going in the public schools. And we've always felt safe in the Catholic schools. You know, I have a 22-year-old son, a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old daughter, and a 12-year-old daughter. She goes to St. Henry's, and my senior is at St. Cecilia's, and then my eldest daughter is in college. And I still feel good about my choice about putting my kids in Catholic school. But that doesn't mean I'm not upset about what's going on in the public schools. We're all connected. My kids are going to grow up, and most of their peers will have been educated in public schools. These kids that are educated in public schools are going to grow up and make policy. And when I'm old and gray, sitting in a nursing home, they're going to decide how much health care I'm allowed to have. So I care, and I don't sit there and think, just being my own. So I got involved in the textbooks because we were finding disturbing material in textbooks. So I started studying the textbook system, the State Textbook Commission, how it works, how we vet our books, and just in time for this year is social studies, which is a real ripe subject for that material. But then I also started hearing about Common Core. And even though I was disturbed, I always did, well, at least my kids are in private school, right? At least my kids are safe. Then my daughter came home and she was in the car and she said, well, we found out today, Mom, why Obama wants to military strike in Syria. And I'm like, oh, really? And she's in 7th grade and I'm like, well, what did they say? Oh, well, because they're using chemical weapons on civilians. And I'm like, well, did they talk about that they're not really sure who used the chemical weapons, or that there's a question in that, or did it come up in the discussion? Did they say this is what it says, but these are the two sides of this? No, that's not what happened. And the material was in the Junior Scholastic, which 95% of that is awesome stuff, but it still had this little thing in it. But I said, well, you know, that's just one thing. That's just one thing. It's a teaching tool, right? You talk about it in class, and we'll talk about it around the dinner table, and I'll take care of that. And then I read this article in the Tennessee Register last October or November, and it says, Catholic schools in position to adapt to Common Core. And I was like, no way. This lady from the National Catholic Educators Association was touting the wonders of Common Core, and I'll just try to read a few quotes from the article.
Quickly. Sorry.
September 27th is when so if you want to research it. Actually, after I wrote my letter to the bishop, I was no longer able to find this article online, but I've got the hard copy. Catholic schools are in a good position to adapt to Common Core state standards for education being implemented in Tennessee and other states across the country, said Kathy Mears, Executive Director of the National Catholic Educators Association Elementary School Department, while at Father Ryan. So, you know, I'm like, okay, how far down in the sand can I put my head before I finally have to say, look, you're spending all this time on looking at public school textbooks, thinking your kids are fine. When's the last time you even looked at your own kid's textbook? So then I said, okay, Liz, you got to bring your textbooks home so I can take a look at them. It took a while to get those textbooks to come home, but I did. And I have to say, most of them were okay. I called the diocesan superintendent of schools, Teresa Williams' office, and I was able to get a hold of the curriculum director. And the best information I could get was they're not implementing Common Core this year. And I went, okay, well, how fast can I get my kids through school? And then I read another article in the same paper that St. Rose of Lima was getting a $50,000 grant to implement Singapore math. And everybody knows that Singapore math is just great, right? It's been used by Singaporeans, it's touted as one of the best in the world. But I've heard a certain person named Julie West tell me that they've created a new kind of Singapore math that's dumbed down just for Common Core. And this one, it's called Math in Focus. And I'm still trying to get hard facts that is that kind of math, but I'm very disturbed. They say they're not implementing Common Core, but we are implementing Singaporean math. So, and that's just at one parish. But you can see where we're going with this. What I really would like you to do is, if you're disturbed about Common Core in the Catholic schools, is to write the diocese and let them know. Because 10 voices is a whole lot louder than one voice.